The knights of medieval Europe, a source of mystery, a source of myth, a source of legend. These brave souls routinely risked their lives for their lord, but for all these myths, few people actually know the truth of the medieval knight. In this production, we will explore the truth behind the warriors of medieval England.
First, we must note the following. Knight comes from Old English word for servant. Knights were bound to a local fief, pledging military service to a liege or king in return for an honorary title of knighthood and land owning of their own. Knights began as sons of nobles who had advanced through several stages of training and apprenticeship. Knights started as pages, glorified errand boys, who had some basic education of falconry, theology, and rudimentary academic studies with a priest. After they turned 15, pages became squires. Squires received the sword blessed by a bishop or priest, and were allowed to own armor rather than borrow it. Squires continued their training until being granted the title of knight at the age of 21.
The main weapon of medieval Europe, normally portrayed in movies and such, are swords. Swords were usually quite simple affairs made of low-grade steel, with a simple hilt, pommel, and crosspiece. Swords varied in size, from single-handed swords meant to be wielded with shields, or the massive, two-handed long swords wielded by the Picts. Unlike the swords of their Japanese contemporaries, European swords were double-bladed, with blades that tapered towards the tip for stabbing. As plate armor became more sophisticated, swords were used more for finding the vulnerable gaps in armor plates than the slashing seen in Hollywood films. More ornate and decorated swords belonged to higher-class nobles and were usually ornamental. Other weapons of the time were flails, maces, and billhooks.
Though knights were civilized and well-trained, they were still immortal. To compensate for their flesh and blood, a knight was to be fully suited in armor. In terms of knights, armor was provided in large overlapping plates. The plates would be sectioned at the knight's joints for max movement and mobility. The overlapping of the plates would ensure that joints wouldn't be left open to enemy attack. Armor also included shirtsen around the tops of the thighs. Armor was mainly constructed using casemate plate construction techniques. This made sure that the armor was hard as well as structurally sound. Once these features were achieved, armor was considered strong. Strong armor could hold up against bashing attacks with flails and other heavy weapons.
The most important aspect of the knight was the horse. It was the horse that allowed the knight to strike fear into the hearts of rebellious peasants or Saracens. The horse has always been an essential part of a knight, ever since the first heavy-mounted cavalry, where the knight's horses were usually armored with a skirt of chainmail or thick leather and a plate mask with blinders on the horse's eyes to prevent panicking. The armor was important, as if a horse fell due to injury, the knight would often be tangled in the stirrups and killed by the enemy.
Swords, armor, horse, role in society, all of these are important aspects of a knight. But the most defining and important aspect of a knight, by far, was chivalry. Chivalry was what separates the knight from the common soldier. It is a code of honor, like the Japanese Bushido. Chivalry governs all concepts of knightly life, from what weapons were used to how one would line up in battle. The principal tenets, or 10 commandments, if you will, of chivalry, are, and this follows, thou shalt believe that the church teaches, and thou shalt observe all its directions. Thou shalt defend the church. Thou shalt respect all weaknesses, and shalt constitute thyself the defender of them. Thou shalt love the country in which thou wast born. Thou shalt not recoil before thine enemy. Thou shalt make war against the infidel without cessation and without mercy. Thou shalt perform scrupulously thy feudal duties, if they be not contrary to the laws of God. Thou shalt never lie, and shalt remain faithful to thy pledged word. Thou shalt be generous and give largesse to everyone. Thou shalt be everywhere and always the champion of the right and the good against injustice and evil. To summarize, the knight was a fearsome warrior. His plate armor, case hardened, protected him in battles. His double-edged sword slew the enemies of his liege, who gave him land in exchange for the knight's loyalty. His horse was what made him such a fearsome warrior. But what makes a knight really a knight was his belief in the idea of chivalry, the moral code that governed his existence. The knight was truly a unique warrior.
While the most well-known of the medieval warrior elite were the European knights, Japanese samurai came in a close second. They, too, practiced a form of chivalry known to them as bushido. They also used horses in combat and carried a special sword called a katana, although this was not their primary weapon. Their system of government was very similar to that of England's, using land to pay their resident samurai. Overall, these two fighting forces were similar at their core while developing independently half a world apart.